So what have we discussed so far? We've discussed that the unconscious mind is a machine. It's a machine that functions from specific guidelines, driven by two questions: what does this mean and what should I do? We've talked about the fact that we have an assistant who is monitoring everything that's going on with us, taking everything literally, running ads, dealing with the responses, and scanning other people's ads, and dealing with them to create what we call our experience. Now, a corollary of this, because we are connected at the unconscious level, there are not just ads that are running asking for what we want and offering what we want to give. The corollary of this is, on an unconscious level, everybody knows everything about everybody. And if you are interacting with somebody, whether it's in a personal relationship or it's in a business context, no matter what you are thinking to yourself, no matter what your history is that you may not even be aware of, everything about who you are and what you're thinking, all of that is communicated to everybody else that you interact with on the unconscious level. This is the secret force that I said in the letter that you could harness that governs all relationships. Is that on the unconscious level, no matter what you are saying, no matter what you are thinking, no matter what your experience is, everything about you is being communicated to the other person unconsciously. And then an interesting dynamic can take place. In some cases, none of it leaks to consciousness. They still know, because the assistant's trying to get you what you want. It's trying to help everybody else, and it needs information in order to do that. And we'll be talking more about why in a little bit. So if you are talking to somebody, and let's say you're in a sales context, and you're saying, you know, I really want to help you, and this product would really be great for you, and you really should take 2 million of these because of this benefit, and in your mind you are thinking, boy, is this person a sucker? They don't need this stuff, and I need to hit my quota this month. They are getting that. And it may or may not have impact depending on what the assistant chooses to do with it. And I'll be talking about why and how all that works later. But the person is getting it. If you were the way I used to be, I used to draw in these very troubled, wounded, needy women who just wanted to take and didn't know how to give. And I had all this stuff myself before I finally cleaned it out. So anytime I was interacting with somebody, whether it was meeting somebody, could have been at an event like this, could have been at a party, could have been at work, the minute you engage somebody else unconsciously, everything about who you are is being fed to them. So if you've got issues about this, or you've got this kind of need, or you've got this kind of challenge, or you like this particular weird thing in a relationship, they know that, and the assistant takes all of that into account before a decision is made, whether it leaks into your conscious awareness or not. Everything about who you are and where you've been and what you want is communicated at the unconscious level. This is why in our sales courses, and Sean, I'm sure you remember this, I live my life by the belief system that anything that I'm thinking or anything that I'm feeling, the other person just got consciously. And I would suggest that you all do the same. Because what happens, let's say you're talking to somebody and you're thinking, I got to get my quota this month, so I'm going to slam these 1,000 units on this person, and they don't really need them, but it wouldn't be a bad thing, but they don't really need them. If you think to yourself, oh God, they just heard that, what are you going to do? You're going to change your behavior somehow if you think they just heard that. So it's the second corollary about this. Given the nature of the game, which we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes, there are no secrets. You cannot hide anything from anybody, even if you think you're being very clever and you're being very smart, or even if you're like I was, where you weren't even aware of how shut down and screwed up you were. Everybody else knows. And the minute you interact with them, they get all of that. And that's why, again, you've all had experiences like this. You've met somebody for the first time, and you just had a great feeling about them. You hadn't talked to them, they hadn't opened their mouth, they hadn't said or done anything. You just felt really good about this person. Or you felt really lousy. That's because you interacted with them. Metaphorically, your two assistants engaged, exchanged all this information about who each of you were, and there was compatibility or there wasn't. There was resonance or there wasn't. There was a negative reaction or there wasn't, and that's what you're experiencing. And some people are more sensitive than others, aren't they? By the way, how many of you have been to psychics? How many of you have gotten good information that's been really helpful from psychics? When psychics are good, that's why they're good. They're tapping into all this information that's flying back and forth between the assistants. And when they're not good, sometimes it's because they're fakes and they don't really have ability, and sometimes that there's so much noise flying back and forth that it's hard to interpret it. And it's hard to understand when this stuff's buzzing at fast speed back and forth what just went on between those two assistants. But some people are so sensitive that they can tap into this network and get anything about anybody. And I've been to some phenomenal psychics. I remember I went to one once. I was in a relationship with a woman that she wasn't responding the way I wanted her to respond to me. And it was kind of confusing the way it was looking. So I was talking to this woman who's been very helpful to me. And by the way, I'll give anybody her number if you'd like it at the end of the day. The psychic, not the woman that wasn't. And so she was talking to me, and she said, the problem is, you were seeing this woman, and the two of you were very involved, and she had a lot of space in her life for you and for the two of you. And then you broke up, and she went this way, and you went this way, and she got real busy over here. And she's having trouble figuring out how to fit you back in, because she's got all this stuff going on now. And that's the problem. And she said, she's real busy right now, and she's having trouble figuring out how to fit you in. And this was a Thursday afternoon. And I talked to this woman, the psychic, I talked to this woman, the psychic, Thursday. Talked to the woman, she called me Saturday morning and said, I've been thinking about this, and honest to God, I do not exaggerate at all. She said, I've been thinking about this, and the problem is I've gotten really busy, and I'm having trouble figuring out how to fit you into my life. Almost the exact words. How? Where does that come from? The only place it can come from is somebody overheard an unconscious communication somewhere. Somebody monitored something. Part of how I developed this whole metaphor of the ads is that I kept drawing the same exact kind of woman into my life, and I didn't understand how I could do that. Or I would meet these other people, men or women. I knew a lot of women that kept drawing these men in that abused them physically. Or you get into a situation where somebody walks into a room, and let's say this person is real dysfunctional, and they walk into a room with 300 people, 299 of which are functional, one of which is not, and they are instantly drawn to the one who's not. How? How could that possibly happen? It was those kinds of questions that got me thinking to finally develop this metaphor and to understand that's what's going on. There's this communication. Everything about who we are is being communicated at all times. Sometimes it leaks to awareness, sometimes it doesn't, but it always has impact. It always has impact. And it, again, is another contributing factor to whatever it is that's in your life right now, whether it's really great or it's not. Unconscious communication. The next secret ingredient is what I call let's go to the movies. How many of you in here really love movies? Raise your hand. Is there anybody in here that doesn't? Raise your hand if you don't like movies. Okay, if you don't, then for everything I'm saying, think about books. Or think about going to an amusement park. Do you like either of those? Okay. Okay, those of you that like movies, you can translate in your head. Why do you like them? Okay, so if we take everything that everybody shared, it basically comes down to, if we're going to be general, entertainment, escape, and learning. But the interesting thing is, and Henry, if you don't agree with me, I respect that. In my opinion, no matter how good it gets, no matter how involved you get in the story, whether you're reading or you're watching a movie, you always remember that you're you. You generally are aware that there's a theater and that there are people in front of you and that there are other noises in the theater besides what's on the screen, and you know it's a screen. Even at its best, we are not totally immersed in the experience. We can get close, but we aren't really feeling what the person's feeling. We're getting something, but we don't know what the person on the screen's actually feeling. We don't know what the person's actually experiencing. We aren't them. There's always a distance. There's always a separation between their experience and ours. Would you all agree? So let me ask you a question. And again, not just now, but all day today, I don't want anybody to humor me. I don't want anybody to be in this thing. If he raises his hand, I'm going to raise my hand, and I don't care what it is. What if I told you that I could take you to a very special movie theater where temporarily you would forget who you are and you would actually become a character in a movie of whatever subject interests you, where you could actually become them. You'd forget who you were, you'd become totally immersed in the situation, and you would feel everything they feel, experience everything they experience, and still have the entertainment and the inspiration and the escape and the learning, but at a much deeper and more rich level. How many of you would want to go to a movie theater or read a book like that? You could dive into the book. Raise your hand if you would not be interested in an experience like that. Okay, why would you not?
I was very comfortable with the distance of the normal entertainment because I get emotionally very involved, but it's still out there and I'm still over here. I'm saying for me, I like that safety. So what you're offering is a deeper level, which is like, ooh, I don't know.
What if you knew it was safe?
I'd probably go for it.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? To me, that's what the Earth is. It's a gigantic amusement park where three-dimensional total immersion movies are filmed. See, to me, where all of us started, we're floating off somewhere up there, way up with God, with unlimited power, unlimited creative ability. You think something, boom, it happens. You want to be somewhere, boom, you're there. Everything's instantaneous. There are no limits. You're just exploring pure creativity, massive power. And a bunch of people got together and said, I wonder what would happen if we limited unlimited power. And they created an amusement park where people could play around with that concept. Where instead of you going boom and it instantly happened, you had to go through the steps and see all the things that were in between. And that there'd be a record of it, because there was no recording mechanism when we were up there floating around. So just like Walt Disney had an idea, I'm going to create Disneyland, and I'm going to have certain kinds of rides in it that he anticipated children and adults alike would enjoy, somebody decided we are going to create an amusement park to explore limitation. What happens when you constrict power? What happens when you limit things, when you constrain things? When you put things inside of a container where they can't move the way they are, where they really want to, where there's limitation. And that's how this started. So from a different perspective than what we all look at now, we all took a look at this amusement park, and we picked something that interested us. That's why I had you share with each other something that fascinates you about life. So what happens, let's say you're actually going to make a movie Earthbound. What would be the first thing you would need? Kelly, what would be the first thing you need if you're going to make a movie? A script. And you can either write one or you can what? Or you can buy one. Or you can know somebody else that's got a script that you want to be a part of. So we decide there's something in this 3D amusement park, total immersion movies are filmed, that interests us. And we somehow hook up with a script. Maybe written by us for ourselves. It may be in conjunction with somebody else. It may be a script someone else wrote that said, hey, you want to go play and do this with me? So that's the first step. What would you do after you had a script? What do you have to do then? You got to get a cast. Specifically, you got to have a director. You've got to have somebody that coordinates everything and is in charge. Then you need a cast. What else do you need? A set? What else do you need? Equipment? What other people resources do you need besides a cast? A crew. So here's what happens. We pick something that interests us. A script is written. We hire a director. We hire a cast and crew. Now, based upon what you've learned today so far, how do you think you get the cast and crew into your life? Classified ads. How does a real director or producer get actors or actresses or cast or crew into their movies? They milk their networks, whatever it is. The word goes out, this movie's being filmed. And people raise their hands, or they come to open casting calls, or whatever it is. There's an old thing in the Bible, as above, so below. Everything that happens consciously has a component unconsciously. Every time you interact with somebody on the conscious level, as I said, there's the unconscious component. Every element of this metaphor you'll begin to see almost fits exactly. So you decide there's a subject that interests you, a script gets written. Now you're up here floating and you've got unlimited power, right? And you're interested in playing around with this limitation experience. So, and I call that part of you, the real you, I call the greater self. In metaphysical literature, it's called the higher self. It's called all kinds of things. I call it greater self because I don't like this hierarchical stuff of higher and lower and us being lower or something. So I call greater, which to me means going wide versus going higher. So this greater self, this real you, is up there deciding I want to play with this movie. I want to be in this total immersion experience. So it splits off part of itself that I call the personality. And the greater self then becomes the director of the movie. You all with me? If I'm going too fast on anything, let me know. So the real you, the unlimited power you that's up there frolicking with God, if you will, becomes the director of the movie, splits off a part of itself to go have this experience. And that's the part that forgets. That's the part that we're all aware of right now. It's what I call the personality. The script is written. The cast and crew are hired, of which there's an assistant that does what? Listens, manages the communication flow, does all of this. Now, in a movie, is everybody that's there in the movie there by choice? Yes or no? Okay. Are they all getting benefit out of it in one way or another? Yes or no? Okay. Are sometimes the topics of movies, do they have some pretty gruesome stuff? Let me ask you a question. How many of you saw Silence of the Lambs? Raise your hand if you did not see it. Are you aware of it if you didn't see it? That it was a pretty gruesome thing? Answer me a question. Why would a guy like Anthony Hopkins, who's a great actor in my opinion, why would he want it, besides money, why would he want to take on the role of a cannibal who does such what most of us would call, from a judgmental perspective, gruesome things? Why might an actor want to do that? Let's have the microphone. Go ahead, Pam, if you want to talk.
Because it's an incredible challenge.
Because it's an incredible challenge. Good. Ray.
Doing something completely out of his character, that he says, I can do this and this. This is something that I would have to go 180 degrees on, and I want to get it done.
Okay, good. Someone else. Why might an actor want to take on a role that gruesome?
Well, it's the same as what he said. It's just stretching your limitations, getting as far out as you can.
Okay, good. How many of you in here like Stephen King books? How many of you can't stand that kind of stuff? Okay. How many of you absolutely, and I'll get to the question, Jim, and the others. How many of you absolutely love big blockbuster adventures like Schwarzenegger or Harrison Ford or those kinds of things? How many of you don't? How many of you love dramas? How many of you prefer comedy? How many of you don't like comedy at all? How many of you like, real tear-jerker kind of things? How many of you feel manipulated and don't like that at all? See, when we're watching a movie, no matter what the characters do, it's pretty much okay, isn't it? Because we know it's not real. Nobody really got their face eaten off. That woman really wasn't in the bottom of this pit being held by this wacko guy that had the surgery. It's okay because on some level we know nobody really got hurt. None of the stuff really happened. It's all an illusion, so it's okay. I would suggest to you everything that is going on the planet right now is different people running different movies, playing different games, and exploring what interests them. Even if it doesn't interest you, because you could see by just looking at the movies. I was in with Nick, and Nick and I were in Barnes & Noble yesterday. If you were to go down every single Carol or whatever they're called and look at all the titles that there are of books, or you were to go through some directory of movies, there's every conceivable subject. I just rented a movie called The Piano because I'd heard it was so good. How many of you have seen that? How many of you liked it? It was horrible to me. There was this repressed woman, and in the end she plays the piano. That's the thing she loves most, and this guy ends up, who is her husband, chopping off one of her fingers. And all this other stuff, I mean, the energy of it to me, just to me, was horrible. I can't stand, I don't even know why I went to Silence of the Lambs. If I knew what was going to happen in that, I wouldn't have gone. I don't like that kind of stuff. But the truth is, even if I'm not interested in it, even if you're not interested in it, people are fascinated by all the possibilities. The whole game down here is what would happen if. And there are people down here playing out every single scenario of what's possible in a situation just to see what's possible. And nobody gets hurt. Nobody really dies. Nobody really gets stabbed. Nobody really loses $200 million. It's all a gigantic game. Now, how many of you saw the movie Splash? How many of you liked it? There was this scene in that movie where Tom Hanks comes home and Daryl Hannah's watching this Western and she's crying. Do you remember the scene? And he says to her, "What's the matter?" And she says, "Well, you know, the cowboy just got killed," or whatever it is that she said. And he said, No, he didn't really get killed. He's just an actor. It's fake. And next week he's going to die on some other show. And the next week after that he's going to play somebody totally different. It's all a game. I would suggest to you it's the same down here. It's all a game. Everybody's playing roles. Everybody auditioned. Everybody is playing the role that the script told them to play, and nobody gets hurt, and everybody wins. Now, when I share this with people, most people have no trouble accepting this with somebody like John Elway, where everything seems to be going great, you know? Or for somebody who's president of the United States or a billionaire, or all these things that there are so many things that we want. But when they look at something like a Hitler, or they say, Jesus, you know, a lot of things will happen. When I tell people this, they'll say, geez, if I was writing a movie, I would not write what's happening to me right now. I don't like this. Why would I want to be in this movie? How many of you felt some of those things when I shared this idea with you? Yeah, but let me ask you another question. How many of you have been in a movie, and the movie was like 2 hours long, and at the 40-minute point, the character was in deep shit, and 15 minutes later, everything changed? How many of you have been in an experience like that? Now, we have this whole happy ending thing with movies typically, although it's starting to change. They aren't all that way, but the thing is, if you look at your life right now as just a scene in a movie that isn't completed yet, and it's going to end the way you want it to end, if you judge the movie in that moment when the character was in deep shit, would you be accurate or fair, yes or no? No, because there's still so much to happen. You don't know where it's going to go. You don't know what the purpose of it is. It's the same thing with us. Our movies last as long as our lifetimes last, which can be 5 years, 2 years, 6 months, 85 years, whatever it is. And at any given moment, it's just one scene. And you don't know where it's going to go, and you don't know what's going to happen. If I had judged my whole life based on the point when I hit my lowest low, I probably would have checked out. I'm light years from there right now. But that was part of getting me where I want to go. So, we're up here floating around with unlimited power. We decide we're going to play a limitation game. We write a script. Our greater self becomes the director. A part of ourselves splits off into what I call the personality. That's who we all think we are right now, to totally immerse ourselves in an experience. Now, when we talked about the benefits of movies, the benefits were we get to feel emotions, we get to learn, and we're inspired, but inspired is really a kind of an emotion. So we're feeling emotions or we're learning. Would you all agree those are two of the major things that happen when you're in the experience? You can feel emotions or you can learn. That's the only point of the game. It really doesn't matter what's going on outside of you. That's just props. That's just scenery. That's just script outlines. What's important to you, the reason you're here, is because of your internal experience. Because there's an emotion you wanted to feel, because there's an experience you wanted to have, because there's something you wanted to learn. And that's it. The rest of it is just props and illusion designed to support you in having that experience. So again, when you're in your life and you're having challenges or you're having a difficult time, remember the only thing that matters, first of all, it's a scene in your movie and you don't know where it's going to lead. And secondly, the only thing that matters is what you're experiencing internally. That's all that matters. What you're learning, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, because that's what you're after. And nobody gets hurt. Now, why did a whole bunch of people sign up to do the Hitler game? I don't know. It doesn't interest me. But if you factor out victims, if you factor out that something happened to somebody against their will, and you factor in choice, you factor in that someone's interested in exploring that reality, even if you're not, if you factor out all the stuff that so many of us put on to these situations and you factor in these other things, it becomes a totally different ballgame. It becomes just like that splash scene. You can start to watch things from a different perspective without judgment because you don't know what someone else's movie is about. You don't know what they're wanting you to do, consciously necessarily, in bringing you into their life. You don't know what the role was. Everybody's playing around with things that they want to play around with. How many of you have been to an amusement park? How many of you went to an amusement park with more than one person and they wanted to go on a particular ride you did not want to go on, and so they went off and went on their ride and you went on a different ride? How many of you did that? How many of you were aware of the fact while you were on a particular ride that there were other rides that other people were on, whether you knew them or not? And how many sometimes it just doesn't interest you? That other particular ride just doesn't interest you. It fascinates somebody else. Now again, it's most difficult to accept this in my experience when you're looking at what we would call negative experiences. But if you have any difficulty accepting why somebody would want to do a total immersion negative experience, then ask yourself, why would somebody want to go see Silence of the Lambs? It was one of the most successful movies in recent history. Why would so many people want to go to that? I would suggest the answer is because there's something about it that interested them. Why does somebody go to an adventure or a drama or a romance or whatever the other kinds of movies? Because there's something about it that interested them. And that's it. Ray, microphone.
I'm really curious how many people would go to see Silence of the Lambs if the critics, in quote, and whoever they were, hadn't thought it was such a great movie. How many people would go on their own to see a movie like that?
There are millions of people that buy, and I don't mean to pick on him, it's a good example for me. There are millions of people that out of pure choice buy Stephen King's books and like the feeling of terror or whatever it is that he generates in them. I don't know why. Then I'm sure you have a valid point. But there's still lots of people that are just fascinated with that.
It's really interesting. Tom Cruise plays every movie. He looks alike, talks alike, and does everything. His greatest acting role was in a movie called Born on the 4th of July, where he played Ron Kovac, and I thought he was fantastic in the movie as an actor because he got out of himself into something else.
Yes.
And the movie wasn't that kind of success that all his cutesy things are.
Right. It wasn't as pleasurable an experience for a lot of people to see somebody in that much pain. But there are other people that are interested by it. So all over the world, I'll get your questions in a minute. All over the world, like I just went to see a movie with Nick, Clear and Present Danger, with Harrison Ford. And it's about CIA and spies and drug cartels. How many movies have we seen like that have been about spies? How many times have we seen like that and we enjoy it? I don't know if anybody in this room wants to be a drug dealer or wants to be a spy, but we're fascinated by those worlds. Think of how many movies we've been to. Think of how many people went to The Godfather to see what it's like to be inside the world of, I'll just call it the mafia. It's fascinating to so many of us. And then there are people that are really fascinated with particular things that don't interest most of us. There are people on this planet that are playing political games. There are people on this planet that are playing racial games. There are people on this planet that are playing proficiency games. I want to become absolutely masterful at playing the piano. I want to become the best basketball player that's ever existed, Michael Jordan. And they spend a lifetime or a series of lifetimes doing nothing but getting proficient in a particular thing. To me, besides the fact that I just believe all this, there's no way you can explain somebody, and sometimes I forget who it is. Is it Mozart that started composing at 3 or 4 or something, or is it one of the others? How do you explain that? A 3 or 4-year-old kid ends up being that masterful at something, just popped out of the womb like that? My suggestion is, I don't know what it looked like, because for Mozart, I don't know what Mozart wanted to play with, to be able to get in touch with that kind of stuff, to be that good. But in my view, he spent a whole bunch of lifetimes doing something because he was interested in becoming proficient at that. Why? I don't know. I don't care. Do you care why somebody chooses to go on a roller coaster or not? Why they choose to go in the haunted house at Disney World or not? It doesn't make any difference. You're in an amusement park, you're playing. If you want to go play with something, you go play with it. Nobody gets hurt, nothing happens. It's all a game to learn or experience emotions, or something falling under those categories. And there were some questions.
Just in the real life situation of Ted Bundy, my experience has been that one of the strongest PSs we can add to a classified ad is fear. And in the studies of the victims that were done, that were Ted Bundy's victims.
Victims in quotes.
Victims in quotes. All of the parents, without question, all had comments like, I always knew this would happen to my daughter. I always told my daughter that she needed to park her car underneath street lights at night and watch out for men at night, and installed a tremendous amount of fear PS to become that part of that movie of Ted Bundy.
Right. Which I'll get to other questions in a minute, but that brings me to my next point, which I want to start, and then we'll stop and get some other questions. You write this script, you've got the director, you've got the cast, you've got the crew, you've got all these actors that are going to play minor or major roles in your movie, be it parents or a teacher or brother and sisters or a coach. And this script is written that starts when you're born and goes until you die, and all of your experiences are designed to program you to become the person and have the experiences that you want to have. It's all intentional. So when we get back to the concept of the brain saying, what does this mean and what should I do, and it going and scanning instructions, whatever instructions are in you are in there by choice, they're in there purposefully, and they're in there to create the character that you want to play. It is not random. You just happen to have these parents and you have these experiences, or you have a mother that installs that kind of stuff. It's not accidental. You're just like a director of a movie controls every aspect of the movie. Your director controls every aspect of your movie from behind the scenes to create the experience for you that you want to have. It's all intentional, and the programming process starts when you're a kid, and it continues until you leave. So that the what does this mean and what should I do, and your response and your feelings and the people that come in and out of your life and what happens to you is all not prearranged, which we'll get into this in a minute, but it's all controlled from behind the scenes to give you the experience that you want to have. None of it is accidental. And getting back to where's Kelly? To Kelly's question, there's none of the maliciousness. Because if somebody comes into your life and has a particular kind of an impact, it's choice. You want to have that kind of impact on you so that it will create the impact, move you in a particular direction that's where you want to go. They're doing you a favor. They're giving you a gift, and they're getting one in return, even though we don't always know what it is. When I look back to my experience with this woman named Cindy, and those of you that have been through Unlimited Power, you'll probably remember me saying this. I was at a point where unconsciously an ad went out into the network that said, I am ready to deal with this old neurotic crap that's screwing up my life. So bring somebody into my life that's going to push every single button I have and keep pushing it until I finally confront the stuff, clear it out, and heal it. Now, why Cindy raised her hand, and for the life of me, I have no idea what she got out of this scenario. Because she came with all this stuff about men and being mistreated by men and all these different things, and as far as I can tell, her interaction with me, even though it's not accurate, deepened it. But she convinced herself this, so this whole thing was deepened, and I don't know what she got out of it, but I know that she did. I know that she agreed to push my buttons and help me get to this place, that I wanted to be, and she got something in exchange. Now, what that is, I don't know, and I don't care. It's not my movie. I'm curious, but I don't really care. And that's what happens in so many of our relationships. They come into our lives because they auditioned for a role that we asked them to play. They play that role. They have the kind of impact we wanted them to have that enables us to go where we want to go and experience what we want to experience. Microphone. Let's give Pam a hand for doing this. It's not easy.
Like the metaphor you were just talking about, that everything came up and you brought somebody in your life to teach you those lessons. I recently rented My Life with Michael Keaton. Has anyone seen that? Yeah, and basically the healer he finally goes to in the end when he's dying of cancer says that, you know, the cancer is basically life's way of teaching him all the lessons he needed to learn. He kept all the anger inside all the years, and of course, you know, it ate at him, and basically the end of his life now is his lesson. And so it's just a really strong, powerful metaphor
Yes.
for what you're talking about today. And we're talking about movies too, so it came to mind.
And the only thing I want to add to that is that to me, and this is a very minor in some ways, but major in others distinction that's critical, Earth is not a school. What do you think of when you think of a school? Somebody telling you you've got to do something that you don't want to do, you're being controlled, everything's outside of your control. What do you think of when you go to an amusement park? Fun. You choose. You're only there if you want to go. I mean, maybe you went on a field trip or something, but basically nobody forces you to go to an amusement park. You can choose any ride you want. You can go on this one and not that one. You can go on this one with Susie because Susie likes getting scared on the roller coaster and you like it when she screams and stuff. But you wouldn't go on it with so-and-so because they throw up. You choose who you're going to be on the rides with. And it's an amusement park. It's not a school. You don't have lessons you have to learn. It's not the kind of a thing of those of you that have studied reincarnation where you have these past lives. You got to keep coming back until you finally get it right, and then you can graduate. That's not the game to me. You're here playing with what you want to play with, which sometimes includes learning, and sometimes includes getting these kinds of experiences, but nobody's forcing you. It's nothing outside of you. It's pure choice, and it's you, because something about it interests you. Jim?
How do you differentiate between the script that the higher self writes for you, me, and the old concept of predestination?
Everybody's different. There are certain people who come down here and have a very specific plan of what they're going to do. Everything is rigidly played out, and it plays out the way it's meant to play out, and there's not a lot of quote-unquote free will. There are other people that come down here and they decide, I really want to play an international political thriller game. And I don't really care what happens specifically, I just want to play that game. So they get down here and they make it up as they go along. And then there's every variation in between. For example, there are a lot of times, those of you that know anything about movie making, where there's a very specific script. The actors, the actresses, the directors, the producers, everybody signs on to create this specific script. And then there's a scene going on where an actor and actress does a spontaneous something. And the director happens to like it. So it stays. Or it changes the whole direction of the movie. My favorite example for this was, how many of you remember the whole William Kennedy Smith rape thing? You look at a situation like that, and regardless of whether you think he's innocent or guilty or what happened in that situation, there was a situation where two people got embroiled in this kind of a controversy. So there's two options. Did they plan it, and it was predestined before they got into the bar? Or did they get into the bar, and all the information about us unconsciously is always being shared and sent around? The directors of their two movies decided there could be an interesting scenario here. And it was decided then, spontaneously. It happens all different ways depending on what your movie's about. Everybody's different. If you look at the childhood of somebody like John Elway, in my opinion, just to use him as an example, I like the guy and I think he's very talented. My guess, and I don't know him so I could be wrong, is that his whole childhood was pretty rigid. He chose a father who was a coach who probably drove him and pushed him and taught him things. And my belief is, all the way up to when he starts football, it was probably pretty controlled to lead him in that proficiency game direction. And what happens after he gets out of football, I don't know. We're all different. Yes. Kelly.
Like the OJ case and the ancillary victims, like the kids in that. I can see-
Quote, unquote.
yeah. Can you just go through that scenario and tell me, is the script just being written as, it's getting denser and denser and denser, it seems, for some people.
Well, first of all, and write this in your notes, because I don't think I put this. By the way, is there anybody that doesn't have paper or pen that would like it? Should have asked that a long time ago, and I forgot. One over here. Write this in your notes. Now, again, remember, the experience is a total immersion experience. The goal typically is to forget who you are and to totally immerse yourself in a situation. Now, let me ask you a question. If you've gone to a movie a number of times and you know what's going to happen, does the movie still have impact on you? It can. Does it have the same impact on you as when it did the first time? No. Most of the time, we want to be surprised. We don't want to know because there's more impact. So most of the time, you're not meant to know why a particular scene in your movie is running until you've gotten what you want out of it. And then sometimes it's valuable to know, and sometimes it's not. Some people just want to get the hell into the experience, go balls to the wall for 80 years, and then make sense of it intellectually later. They don't care about analyzing it. They don't care about knowing what they're learning when they're learning. They just want to go. Other people like me want to understand the process at the same time. So write this in your notes. If you want to know why something is happening to you, if you want to know why something is happening to you or somebody else, like OJ or whatever, or someone you care about, look to what's happening as a result for clues. If you want to know why something is happening to you or to someone else, look to the results for clues. Now, you may never know, but if you're going to know, that's where you're going to get the clues. Or sometimes gifted psychics or channels or other people can help you. Because there are people out there who are gifted at talking to your unconscious and getting answers for you, talking to your director and finding out what your movie's about. There are people like that. And again, I can steer you to some of them if you're interested. May not be part of your ball game, your movie, to find out that way. You may just want to be immersed. So you look at an OJ situation. First of all, we don't know very much yet anyway. But suppose that we do. You look at what happens as a result. There are a lot of cases, for example, where a woman has a miscarriage, or a baby dies at 6 months old, or at 2 years or something, and people think it's this horrible thing, and how could that possibly happen, and it's so terrible. Very often, if you look at the lives of those people, that event sets something into motion in the parents that moved their life where they wanted it to go. Something, depending on how this OJ thing shakes out, let's say he didn't do it, and the whole thing has been very unfair, and the media trashed his reputation, and he's been in jail and has to spend millions of dollars on legal fees, and he's innocent. What might happen as a result of that? We might all finally make the media take responsibility for some things that they're doing. Look what happened just when it first came out. All this stuff started coming out about domestic violence. All this stuff started coming out about just because someone happens to be good carrying a football doesn't mean they're a good person. All these illusions, and this is going to get to the final session of the day, there's something that's going on at this point in history that's very unique and has a lot of impact on our lives, and I'll talk about that at the end. So you look at all these things, you look at what's happening as a result. I'll give you an example from my life. Most of you know that I recently moved out to Evergreen. I found this house in Evergreen just after Thanksgiving, and I loved it. And those of you that have been there, you know why. I'm a very optimistic person, and I really have this model that I'm sharing with you today installed in me at a very deep level. So I went ahead and bought this house before my house in Denver was sold. 8 months later, my house in Denver has not sold. And it is causing me some cash flow problems and a lot of annoyances that I'm not happy with. So you look at why is it happening. There's a lot of earthbound stuff, right? It's a unique house. It's got a unique floor plan. This is my old house. It's got a unique floor plan. It's got some bedrooms that are kind of small. It's got a master bedroom upstairs and 3 bedrooms downstairs, and a lot of people don't like that. They want to be on the same floor as their kids. So there's all these earthbound things. But the earthbound things don't account for this house not selling for 8 months in a booming market. So what I do is I say, okay, why is this thing happening to me? Look at the results. What's happening? Remember, the point of the game is what's going on inside of you, internally. So you say, what's happening to me inside, internally, as a result of this outside thing that's happening to me by choice that I've created, and everyone who's playing in this, including the people who aren't buying my house, are playing in this. So I look at it, and I got a lot of benefits out of it. They may not be true. I think they are. They may not be. It's helped me to heal some old money crap that I grew up with because it surfaced. It's helped me to clear out a bunch of old fear and some old beliefs I had growing up that the universe was against me. And given the chance, it'll go in there and screw up anything I'm messing around with just to make me squirm. And it brought up a lot of this stuff to continue the clearing process. Because, you know, I am 37 years old. That's 37 years of 365 days of God knows how many hours, minutes, and seconds where people have been coming into my life and creating associations in my head and programming me to be a certain way. You don't just learn a model like this and all of that goes away in 2 seconds. It's a process. And I've come light years in 3, 4, 5 years, and I still have stuff to clear. I still have places where I get triggered. I still have places where old neurotic bullshit stuff that knocks the quality of my life down comes up. So that's how I look at situations like that. We need to wait and see some more of the evidence and stuff in the O.J. situation. But my belief is the kids are not victims. Nicole and Goldman are not victims. They all chose to film a particular movie scene at a particular point in history for everybody, and in my opinion, since this is so global and visible, it's a game that's going to benefit everybody on the planet. Because see, the interesting thing is, and I'll talk more about this at the end of the day, there was a time in history, there was no TV, there was no radio, there was no satellite, there was no telephone, and we were all over the planet playing all these different games, and we had no idea what other games anyone else was playing with. We didn't even know they existed. Somebody could be off in Australia playing some Aborigine game, and Columbus could have been in Spain or wherever he was playing some Discover America game, and you had no idea anybody else was anywhere else. We were all totally immersed in these limited little universes. Now everybody knows everything. And all of a sudden everybody's watching all these different games being played where they used to be separate. It's like before you used to go to an amusement park, you'd go on one ride, you didn't even know there were any other rides. It was often this somewhere else, and you didn't know anything else was there. So we need to see how it shakes out, but it's my belief that if you look at things from the perspective I'm suggesting you look at them, it'll become pretty clear